Hi, thanks for joining us, Rachel. Today we'll be talking about your experiences with teaching maths and science in your family daycare service. So thank you. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me today, Kelly.
So starting off, we'll talk about maths and science, but thinking about maths first, how do you feel about it?
Well, as I was just briefly saying to you before, growing up, I found maths really hard. But once I started a uni course with maths, I found that teaching maths to little children actually came quite naturally. So I I feel that children aren't aware that I'm actually teaching them maths, but we do it in our everyday learnings. So such as singing number songs, counting games like What's the Time, Mr. Wolf? We do that quite. I have a group of children that regularly ask to play these group games, and so they're not aware that they're learning maths. But when you say what's the time, Mr. Wolf, and Mr. Wolf turns around and says 5 o'clock, and then we're taking five big steps to the wolf. So I believe they're learning the basic concept of math skills through those games. We play bingo matching games. Um, how many times you can bounce the ball, how many times can you catch the ball, and we count that. When we sing happy birthday, if it's someone's birthday, we might do 3 claps because they've turned 3. So I just think any of those activities are incorporating maths into the learning experience, and I feel that um, by doing these activities, the children are being introduced to these very basic maths concepts. But I think it just builds on it as they grow older. It builds on those foundations of learning.
Great. So you were saying that initially you didn't feel so confident about maths. Was that because of school or?
Yeah, growing up, I was never very strong at maths, and when I started doing my Bachelor of Teaching through uni, I did a few maths subjects, and I had to read everything, and I had to cover everything to understand everything. It was like going back to basics and learning how to do maths again as a 7, 8 year old. Luckily, I had 3 children, and they were in primary school, so I kind of used them as my guinea pigs, and I worked really hard. And then I found a new love for maths, and I didn't find it as overwhelming as previously when I'd think, oh, how am I going to introduce maths into, how do I introduce this concept with, 2 to 5 year olds? I felt that was very challenging, but after doing the course, I was able to walk away with ideas and strategies to put into place to aid the children in my care and introduce maths as a very basic concept. So, yeah.
It sounds like you discovered a real joy and sort of love of maths along the way. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
great to hear.
yeah.
When you think about how you plan for maths experience in your program, what sort of things are you thinking about when you're planning?
I want the activities to be engaging, so that promotes like the a basic math concept through play and exploration. So counting activities, counting objects using toys or blocks or natural resources such as rocks, and asking the children to count them into groups, especially if they're like 4 and 5 year olds and they're quite interested in, telling you how old they are, showing you how many fingers that is on your hands. Well, then you can introduce objects to show number counting that way, and counting songs like Five Little Ducks, Five Speckled Frogs. Like I said before, What's the Time, Mr. Wolf? So all those are activities that I would put into my weekly program with my children.
Brilliant. What about thinking about those sort of unplanned experiences, things that crop up throughout the day where you see something happen and you think, this is a great moment, I can step in. How do you intentionally consider those moments and support mathematical thinking and learning?
First of all, I would stand back and observe what was happening, and be attentive to the spontaneous moments where the mathematical concepts are naturally arise. such as a counting items or measuring distances, or when children are recognizing a pattern, I would just in their everyday learning, I would encourage them to further create that pattern. But basically, I would stand back, observe what's happening, and then I would engage in some open-ended questions with the children, asking them what they think is happening, what can they see, and trying to encourage them to critically think about what's happening in that process.
Brilliant, thank you. If we look at the same questions, but just shift the focus to science then now. So how do you feel about science yourself?
Well, once again, I was a little bit overwhelmed with science, but we looked at Science Week earlier this year, and it was actually a really rewarding week. I made a volcano with my children. So I had a big soft drink, a 1.25 litre soft drink bottle, and we ended up getting Play-Doh, just a tanny coloured Play-Doh, and we made this lovely volcano, and we filled it with vinegar and bicarb soda, and we put food colouring in, and we made this amazing volcano. And so we actually did that every day, multiple times, with lots of vinegar. So I felt like it allowed it sparked like a curiosity in the children watching the experiments happen. So I definitely found teaching children science not as challenging as first on. And I think the main thing is to make sure those science experiments are always hands-on. So for another example, we got milk and we added into, everyone had their own bowl and they all had their own food colouring, and we put a little bit of food colouring into the milk, and then they used cotton buds to swirl it around and see what happens. And another one is, once again, milk in the bowl with the food colouring, but then if you use washing detergent and you drop it in, and the food colouring kind of, what's the word, just makes it splurge everywhere type thing. So those, using these hand-on experiences allows children's curiosity to, run a little bit wild, and the excitement in it. So I think doing hands-on experiences is definitely the best way to introduce science into your learning environment for little ones.
Yeah. And it sounded great, giving them the opportunity to come back and do it again and again and again.
It went on for a good solid hour. I think the volcano, we just kept adding the vinegar and the bicarb soda, and then they were tipping it in as well. And yeah, the little explosion, the excitement, it was amazing. So
what were some of the conversations or some of the observations that children had around that?
So most of the conversations were, do it again, let's do it again. When mummy came in to pick them up or daddy came in to pick them up, they wanted to show their parents what we'd done. Can we go home and do this? And so I was just telling the parents exactly what we did. So then on the weekend, when they had some more time, they would go and get vinegar and bicarb soda, and even just tipping it into a glass cup. You don't need to make the whole volcano. You get the same reaction from the child, whether it was in a volcano or a glass cup or a bowl. So so that was a lot of the conversations around that, and just the children engaging socially with each other in all the experiments was really lovely.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And it's great to hear that you were able to make that connection between your service and home as well, that children were so excited that they took it home. Yeah, that's brilliant. So you've talked a bit there about using things like Science Week to help give a bit of a focus for science programming, but what other ways or how else do you plan for science in your program?
Let's pick a few little notes. So I think planning science experience involves setting a clear objective into my service, and it's, I guess, incorporating hands-on experiences, observations, watching what the children's reactions are, working out what they think, and then using this as an inquiry or then I think using the inquiry as a questions and developing open-ended questions with the children to see where their thoughts and ideas develop from as well. I don't know if that's really making sense, if I'm coming across.
Yeah, no, it does. That's great. It sounds like there's a lot of conversation between children, a lot of interaction, and a lot of sort of inquiry taking place.
Absolutely. So it's just, I think when it comes down to it, I think whether it's science or maths, it has to be hands-on. You can't sit there and expect them to learn through just talking to them. You have to physically be doing a hands-on activity. And I don't always program those. I find that it happens just naturally throughout the day, and you've just got to take that time to observe and then implement then and there on the spot, because otherwise I think you miss those learning experiences if you go, oh, I'll program that for next week.
Definitely.
That concept in their little mind may not be there then. So
that leads really nicely into our next question, which is how you are intentional around those moments when the unplanned experiences crop up. So do you have any examples or thoughts on that?
I think just taking it in the moment, like making sure that in that moment of time, when you see those intentional learnings pop up, run with them. So whether it was, so for instance, we'd only planned to do for Science Week, we were only really going to do volcanoes. But once I realized the excitement and the engagement from the children, that I had 2- and 3-year-olds sitting at the table for longer than 45 minutes and was maintaining their attention for that length of time, I realized then that I had to find some other activities that were a little bit different, obviously science-based as well, to bring in the next day and implement those into our learning, because I didn't realize how much interest and how engaged the children would be in it. I thought I'd just put the vinegar in and put the bicarb soda in, we'd have a volcano and half of them would walk away and not be interested. But the engagement and their inquiry into the whole learning process and why was that happening? So then I had to break down, because we're adding the vinegar and then we're adding the bicarb soda, and when those two mix together, it makes a big explosion. So I think I just ran with that learning process, that I thought, well, what else can I do? And that's where I ended up with the milk and the food coloring and the dishwashing liquid. And so from then on, after that, even once Science Week finished, we still continued to look at different experiments and see what happens when you mix things and do things. And so even now out in our water play, instead of just putting water in there with the sea creatures, I've actually added ice cubes and food coloring to our water and sand in one section. And I noticed that the little ones quite like to watch what happens to the sand when they pick a handful up and throw it into the water, instead of saying, no, sand's over there, water's over there, like just really engaging in making those connections of what happens when we add something to something else. And so it's kind of like making mud pies. They all love to add the water to the mud and make a mud pie, but they don't get the opportunity to add these different ingredients together normally to see what happens. So anyhow, I hope that's
No, that is brilliant, and it brings us to the end of our questions. So thank you so much. There have been great examples and it's been a really great chat, so appreciate your time.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you.